Those are the things.
All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Thank whoever brought you here. To my regular listeners, listen to me. We are, again, as I know I sound like a broken record when I say it, but I mean it from the heart. We are in for yet another treat, another gem of a person who is about to come on here and completely redefine the term getting old, redefine the term goal setting, redefine the term storytelling, redefine the whole concept of you can only do one thing, about as accomplished of a guy as you can think of, from story filmmaker, scuba diving instructor, cyclist, runner, triathlete, so many things that he continues to strive to do. So with all that, Mr. Jeff Seckendorf, welcome to the Move Swiftly podcast. Great to have you.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you for what you do, because I'm someone that's very heavily involved in fitness, and I've been a trainer, and I've been blessed enough to have a mother who got me into fitness, and she never wanted to get to a point where she wasn't working out and staying active. But when I run into the real world, there's so many people that use their age as an excuse to stop working out, or their circumstances, so many things. And you have a pretty extensive career, so I think it's best to just kind of start from, your background. First of all, how you got into filmmaking, and then you transition into being more of a triathlete and doing all those sort of things. So I'll kind of give you the mic for a second to give a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where it came from because I grew up in a wonderfully middle class family where sports were for the dumb people.
Really?
That's
Wow.
where it was. It's like, love my parents more than anything in the world, but they were not focused on any kind of athletics. So,
Huh.
um, yeah, so I just
So you were
stumbled
like that
in.
as a kid, though? Like, you were playing sports as a kid? Was it something
No,
when? Oh, okay.
no,
So this was
no,
more right. This was later on in life.
no.
You were a film, like you started off as a
Yeah, I
kid, right?
thought
Yeah.
I carried a camera in high school.
Yeah.
That was
Actually,
the
you know
thing.
what I read? I think you started off as a photographer, if I'm
Yeah,
not
stills
mistaken. Right. Yeah.
photographer.
Yeah.
And then I got into video, and then I got into filmmaking, and then I did
Hmm.
35 years as a filmmaker. Um, and someplace along the way, we always had bicycles, right? But they were
Hmm.
like, a Schwinn Varsity, or
Right.
something that weighed like 60 pounds, more than
Exactly.
me at the time.
Right.
And I would ride it around the block, and I'd ride it to school once in a while, but
Hmm.
nothing like that. And then somehow, uh, someplace along the way, somebody gave me a pair of cross-country skis, and I was living in upstate New York. And this was back when the skis were wood, and you had to like put tar on them and take a blowtorch and burn it in and wax
Right.
them and all this other stuff. So it was all cross country. And I
Oh
just
man. Yeah. Yeah.
loved,
I know exactly
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
talking about. Right. I know exactly what you're talking
I just loved the stuff around cross country skis, and it was fun. And I liked the
about.
the waxing and figuring it out and the clister and all this. And I actually became, out of the blue, who knew where it came from, a pretty good cross country skier and then racer.
Hmm.
And but in upstate New York, the cross country ski season is like 2 months long. So we would train on a bike
Right.
in the other 10 months. And then one day I realized that, well, 10 months of cycling was a lot more fun than 2 months of skiing. So the
Exactly.
bike became primary. And that was kind of the beginning of it all. And then I started running and
Hmm.
swimming a little bit. And that's how the whole sports thing started. It just sort of developed,
Right.
when I was 20. So in
Now,
some
how is
ways,
it? One of the things I like to draw a comparison to is when you are workout regularly, it helps your day job. It helps you actually get your thoughts together, helps you process how you're able to do whatever it is you do throughout the day. Can you kind of just go in a little bit on how you being a runner helped you when it comes to writing scripts and being a filmmaker and things like that? Because that's something I think the listeners would benefit from, knowing how much it actually helps a person when it comes to the work that they actually do.
yeah, I think that's a really good question because the the idea of training
Yeah.
at any level, I'm training, as a master's athlete, but for pretty high level stuff. Or, I work with athletes who are training to, do a functional half-hour bike ride 3 times a week.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. But what happens is when you have a successful training event, so whatever that is, intervals, long tempo ride, good swim, something like that,
Hmm.
for me, I start to look at it and say, well, this was really hard and
Hmm.
I was really successful at it.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of my computer and writing a newsletter or writing an email or
Hmm.
building a piece of a web page or working with customers, whatever it happens to be,
Right.
that's nowhere near as hard as my bike ride.
Yeah.
And the bike ride was super successful. So
Hmm.
if I can be successful at this, where I'm pushing my body and my mind to its absolute limit, there's no reason I can't be successful, spending 20 minutes writing an email or writing, building out a web page or something like that. So I think to me, it's that um, correlation or that ability to say, well, if then, right? If I can
Hmm.
do this, then for sure I can do that.
Right.
So a lot of it, of course, is physical. It keeps me strong, healthy, and
Hmm.
and alive, and working and sipping coffee all day long, like I am.
The drink.
But
Right. 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 Right.
but really, it's about being able to say, well, let's be successful at the really hard stuff because it makes
Exactly.
success at the less hard stuff simple.
Yeah, and it also honestly too, it constantly pushes people out of their comfort zone. And too often do people get into a comfort zone and they don't know how to challenge and push that comfort zone or penetrate that comfort zone to achieve great things. And I think it actually is probably a good time too, is to just talk a little bit about some of the films you actually worked on because if I'm not mistaken, I think I read that you won an award, you were nominated for certain things and things like that. So just going a little bit about that.
Yeah, I want to go back 1 second
Yeah,
though
go
and
ahead.
talk about comfort zone because one of the things that I've been really working on as an athlete is the concept of being comfortable being uncomfortable,
Yes,
right?
very,
Being
very
you know,
important.
comfortable being uncomfortable, and that is something that's very clear in particularly endurance sports, right?
Hmm.
Hard ride, hard run, hard swim, not comfortable, but you have to get comfortable being there. And again, it's what I was saying earlier is you just take that concept and just be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like I have to sit here and do like a little web project well Monday now that is
Hmm.
just going to be 2 hours of cut and paste, and
Huh.
it just crushes me to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's not fun,
All right.
but I can be comfortable being uncomfortable because I know what that feels like on the bike.
Exactly. And you do it
So
every single day. And it is worth mentioning too. You still actually are training. Is it to break the 1 hour time just riding around
yeah,
on the bike? Okay.
how far you can get your bike to go in an
How far
hour.
you can
So
take 1 hour?
yeah, so I'm training for that at a local and a national and an international level. So we'll
Cool.
talk about that as we go on because that's a really interesting part of the whole thing. Yeah, as a filmmaker, I spent 35 years doing commercials and movies, and had a pretty successful career. I did a wonderful little film called Judy Berlin, which won the Directors Award at Sundance, and
Uh-huh.
I made a bunch of other movies, and I did like 1,000 TV commercials, and then you know, 1 decade in the end of that, it was like, okay, I got to find a way out of this. The film business, it's a little crazy. It's like,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I haven't ruled it out. As a writer and an author, it's something like nowadays when I'll watch a TV show or watch a old movie or something, I look at it and say, I could write a script. I can write a script, but I have no idea on how I would break into it or if it's something that would be longevity or anything like that. So was there a rewarding aspect of sort of seeing your work being played out on screen? Because I know the feeling of writing stuff and people getting feedback, but to actually see it played out on screen must be something that's like, man, I did that. I created that.
do you love rejection?
Oh shit. Yeah, I mean, I don't love it, but it's just gonna be part of the deal.
It's part of it. There's a joke in LA that, what's the difference between an actor walking across the street and a frog walking across the street?
What's that?
The frog is on his way to a job. And it's true. I spent, my 3.5 decade career in the film industry was a part-time job making movies and a full-time job looking for work.
Really?
And that's how it is for 98% of people in the film business.
Wow.
It's 2 to 3, 4% work all the time,
Mhm.
20 or 30% work most of the time, and the other 60%, are endlessly looking for jobs. And, for me, I was a director of photography. There's a movie with 100 people on it, but there's only one director of photography.
Man.
So, you know, it's if
So
you're
you have
an
to be like
electrician.
constantly. I mean, is that what the process is? Constantly reaching out to whoever they may be and seeing if they would take the story and just having to live with the
Well,
rejection.
I was working for
Yeah.
yeah. I was a director of photography, so I came on later, right?
Uh-huh.
I was working for directors and producers after projects were set up. So I
Really?
was in the hunt for projects along with, 100 other people. So
Man.
it just got to a point where I just wanted something else to do. I mean, I did it for a long time. I was successful at it. And I got
Mhm.
to a point where I couldn't stand looking for work every day, every minute of every day, just staring
Yeah,
at the
eventually,
phone
yeah.
like it's actually going to ring.
Right. Eventually that's a long time to keep up that kind of grind. So how did you get into the scuba diving instructor? Is it scuba diving instructor that you are now? Like when you transition out of filmmaking, did you immediately go into scuba diving instructor or how did that work? What was that transition like?
Yeah. So I was a scuba instructor for a long time.
Hmm.
And when I was starting to realistically say, okay, I want to be done with making movies.
Hmm.
Um, I was looking for a project that was based in education. That was the whole
Oh,
point
okay.
because I was while all along the way I've been teaching in the film industry. I ran a mentoring program for up and coming directors.
Oh, okay.
I taught workshops up at the main media workshops for 25 years,
Mm,
teaching all these different filmmaking courses. So the education piece, I'm a flight instructor from way back and all that. The
mm,
education piece was always really important. So I was just kind of had my radar out for, what would be a cool project that had an education component to it that I
mm-hmm,
could dig my teeth into. And one of my instructors came along and said, "Hey, I want to form a scuba certification and training agency."
mm-hmm,
So this is turned into Unified Team Diving, which is a global scuba training agency. It's still running strong. It's 15 years in now. I still run it. I do it every
mm-hmm,
day. It's super cool. We have a teaching methodology that's a little different from most of the other training agencies. And, we're a boutique agency. There's probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 scuba training agencies in the US and another 20 or 30 around the world.
mm-hmm.
So we're one of those. And it's so much fun.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was gonna ask you.
seriously.
Kind of walk us because I now you got it. Now that's something I'm gonna put on my bucket list at this point. Because as I was doing my research for this, I'm looking at it, I'm like, that would actually be a cool thing to do, seeing underwater and having the experience of that. So kind of walk us through what it's like to actually experience the dive, seeing undersea. I mean, obviously you probably get people prepped and things like that. So, you can
Yeah, so for me personally, you're looking at my diving. I dive at desk.
yeah.
Because I run this company. So most of my time is spent doing, you know, creating educational content, customer service, supporting instructors, supporting instructor trainers, and supporting the students. But, diving's an amazing thing. It's like, where else can you be weightless,
Mhm.
uh, peaceful, no phones? Gotta love that.
You gotta love that. No social media, no distractions, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Mhm.
take a camera, but that doesn't get
Mhm.
much more complicated than that. So it's a beautiful, peaceful way to spend an hour a couple of times and
Right.
then do it again and again and again. So
Mhm.
it's just a lovely, gentle, recreational pastime. It's
Right.
not hardly a sport. It's a pastime. But, we treat it like, so I'm a competitive cyclist. Our training director is
Mhm.
a competitive triathlete. We
Right.
basically treat it like a sport and we train our instructors to teach it like it's a sport. And, we have a coaching program
Mhm.
just like any other endurance sport. We coach scuba instructors and scuba divers in a program very similar to uh, the coaching program that a runner or triathlete or a cyclist would have. So that's really cool too. So
Right.
yeah, the diving's cool, but for me, it's really about the management and running an education company.
Mhm. Okay, so let's get into some of your competitions because one of the things that I did hear you say is that when you got to 50, you just decided to stop running. You just that's something I hope I don't have to do. But you know, you're 50 years old, and again, most people at 50 don't. That's not the thing that they say they're gonna do when they turn 50. But you said you're gonna just stop running, and then you got into cycling. And I'm looking at your background, and I'm seeing champion. I'm seeing it's filled with medals and things like that. Walk us through that decision to stop running to where you are now, and you're looking to break the cycling record for an hour. Because again, this is something that was actually very impressive to me, is that you still are so goal oriented. You're goal oriented, even though you discovered it, and I guess you found a passion for it. And again, like me, I'm a runner, so can't stop. If I'm doing a different 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, all that kind of stuff. So kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, it was actually 60
Was it
when I
60? Okay.
stopped. Yeah, so 9 years ago I stopped running, and I just woke up then, kind of around my birthday. It's like I'm super strong, super durable, not injured, still have hips and knees. It's like what a great time to stop competitive running. And it
And
was
did
like a
you do
switch.
marathons or half marathon? Like, what
No,
was
I was triathlons.
try? Oh, yeah, the triathlon.
I was
Okay,
doing triathlons. So I was running shorter distances, mostly 5Ks and 10Ks.
right.
Um, but and I'm a horrible swimmer. I mean, the
Yeah, I'm telling you that's the one thing I tell, because I run with a group. I'm in West Palm Beach, so I run with a group. They do regular triathlons, and I tell them all the time, look, I'm down for the duathlon, but I don't
yeah.
know. I'm still very nervous about me getting in the ocean and trying to swim with people. But it is definitely something I got to try, because they're on me with it. They're like, look, you can't be talking this fitness game and not be all the way in. So
You got to try it, and the goal is don't drown, crash, or fall.
no dress.
Um, uh, yeah, so I'd come out of the swim and I'd be the last bicycle there, and then
Uh-huh.
I'd pass a bunch of people on the bike ride, then I'd pass the
Right.
rest of them on the run. But yeah, I just got to a point where it's like triathlon's a lot of solo training. It's a
Yeah.
lot of alone hours in the
Hmm.
water on a run. Um, and cycling is social. So, right around that time when I had made this decision, a very good friend of mine was racing on the Velodrome. We have a fantastic velodrome here in San Diego.
Hmm.
And and he was like, come on, let's go watch the races. So I go down there with a friend and we, sit in the stands and I'm watching these guys race. And it was so cool because they're all sitting together in the infield, laughing and telling jokes and having fun. And then a race comes and it's like 6 minutes or 7 or 8 minutes, and they're going as hard as they can. And then they're back in the infield telling jokes and laughing and having fun again. I was like, that's my sport. I
Really?
just love the
Yeah.
social part, the complexity of the track,
Hmm.
and the utter simplicity of the bikes, right? You
Right.
have a bike with one gear, no coasting,
Yeah.
no brakes,
Yeah.
and so I took a track class and another, and I started racing, and it just kept going and going. And now I'm coaching on the track. I'm teaching the intro and the advanced courses, and
Hmm.
I'm competing for this sort of high level national record racing
So,
after that.
so what would you say would be like the next step for you? Like the something that your goal is now. I know you mentioned breaking that like breaking the time for the hour, but is there like goals that you may be working with certain athletes now, and you want to see it grow into like having your own gym or having your own train? Like, how do you see this thing kind of growing for you?
No, I think I might be done starting businesses.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, I mean, you've
yeah, been at that for a long time.
been there, done that.
But I work with athletes, most
Mhm.
of them masters, so
Yeah.
older athletes. I've become kind of a specialist in how not to get injured, which is cool.
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time with these athletes working on nutrition, hydration,
Hmm.
physical health, durability, way beyond just the bike, right? It's I hate to use the phrase and the words about life coaching, but it's kind of like life coaching for sports. It's
Hmm.
I do a whole package, right? It's not just you just don't get bike workouts for me.
Yeah.
And so that's been really fun because I've been able to bring this whole lifetime of experiences and different stuff to coaching. And I think the athletes get a lot out of it, which is cool. So, um, yeah, that's kind of how I go down that road. I'm not going to start another big project.
Right.
I've got lots of projects that
Yeah,
keep me
you
busy.
got a lot of stuff out there. What would you say is sort of a kind of a common mindset amongst these great athletes? And then, and I ask that not necessarily just for me, but for listeners as well. I have a football background, and one of the things I love the sport, but one of the downfalls of our sport is the fact that it's such a short-lived time. You get a short-lived time to be an athlete. You're what? Maybe if you're part of the 1%, you get to be 27, and now you're talking about getting old, when that is, ridiculous. And that's the one downfall about being so dedicated to the game of football. And one of the things that I try to implore and try to teach young people is, your life is just starting.
Yeah.
Playing the game of football is a very small part of your life. And too often do coaches teach running for punishment. They're going to go condition people, so now they have a negative connotation. And I'm really curious to hear what the athletes who are now above 50, 60, 70, what's that, like, their common theme and their personalities like, so we can try to kind of help the young people develop that mindset.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that most of the people who I work with have not come to sport late in life. They've been active
Mm-hmm.
and many of them very fit and either let it go or had a bunch of kids,
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't get it back together, had different responsibilities, had big careers, stuff like that, and are coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good athlete to work with because those are people who still have some muscle memory of what it's like to actually be consistent. Because in any form of training,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what you do, how you do it, who you do it with, the most important thing is consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to have an athlete to work with who understands that the way to get better, the road to getting better is consistency. You've got to do something every day, even if it's rest, but
Yeah.
it's planned. It's not
Yeah.
random. Um, so I think that's the first thing. And the other thing is just, I think my job as a coach and as an instructor and all that is giving people guidance on realistic goals. You know, I, I, I think goals should be like 50% believable, right? If it's more than 50% believable, it's kind of a to-do list. And if it's less than 50% believable, it's kind of a pipe dream.
Right.
So when I started chasing this idea of doing an hour record, it was on the fringe of 50% believable. It was
Hmm.
like, And,
How many times did you attempt it? Have you attempted it
once.
just once so far? Okay.
Yeah, I did it 3 years ago. I set the record at the San Diego Velodrome,
Mm-hmm.
and that started my training. So that was 3.5 years. Well, 3 years ago next week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a buddy of mine broke my record about a month ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But,
it's funny you
but
said that because I was doing a 5K the other day, and a guy, I guess, yeah, he was actually around your age. He looked at me, he goes, "Yeah, eventually the male ego starts kicking in when you really eventually you love your boys, but eventually you're like, hold up now, hold up, you're not you're not gonna just beat my stuff and at least not try it. That's the cool thing about it.
yeah, yeah. So I'm coming back. I'm going to do another one in 4 weeks. I'm just looking at the
Okay,
calendar. So I got to go back and get it back from him in 4 weeks, and I'll be successful at that. I've got it
got it.
dialed now. Um, so yeah, I forgot the question.
Yeah, yeah. No, we did end up getting distracted. But first of all, I asked you about the common theme about a lot of the athletes that you work
Yeah,
with, and I want to make sure I don't brush over what you said. Enough. First of all, it was the consistency. Okay, folks, consistency for you listeners. consistency, consistency, consistency. Whether you, again, may have a kid, you may have life getting away, you may have family situations, you may have a job that's pulling you away from working out, whatever the reason is, the consistency and the mindset towards making sure you get it done. And then the second point that I really want you to elaborate on is the whole concept of 50% goals, making sure they're realistic and not too real, like not over the top, achievable goals, actual achievable goals. So that's what you were starting to say.
Yeah, and so the achievable concept, if you choose a goal that's not achievable,
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at, do you have fear of success?
Hmm.
Right? I mean, everybody talks about fear of failure. Nobody wants to be in
Hmm.
that boat of fear of failure. Fear of success is it's the partner to fear of failure.
It's a real thing.
It's a totally real thing. And one of the ways fear of success demonstrates is by people picking goals that are unattainable.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started training for the hour record, the first thing I did is I laid one down where there was no hour record in my age group.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it wasn't the greatest ride in the world, I mean, it was respectable, but not great. It still let me hold my head up for 3 years and say, I own this hour record at this track
Mm-hmm.
and no one else does.
Yeah,
And so from a mindset standpoint, even though I wasn't competing against anybody because there was no record, it put me in a position to say, well, I've done it once.
yeah,
And even though there was nobody else behind me, I still did it good enough that it took 3 years for someone to come along and break it.
exactly.
Now, I also own the course record at the World 6 Hour Time Trial Championships in my
Mm-hmm.
age group, in this weird category on a fixed gear bike. And I've been doing that ride for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, the first year I did that ride, there was no record in my age group. So I laid it down. And then the next year I beat it.
Yeah.
And then the next year I had COVID, but I raced anyway and had a horrible day.
Mm-hmm.
And now the next year is going to be in a few months. So now, even though I set the record, at least I have someone to compete against,
Exactly.
which is me.
Exactly.
And that helps me too.
Right.
Because again, I'm aging out of 65 to 69 at the end of this year. And I want to lay down a ride at the World 6 Hour that is going to stand up for a long time. The same way I want to lay down a ride in August here, in a month here on the hour at the San Diego track
Right.
that it will be hard for someone to get to.
Yeah. And I'm excited to keep up with the journey. I'm pumped. Can't wait. It kind of validates a lot of the work I do. It validates a lot of the running I do. And it's going to now my goal personally, just talking to you. Now I got to get up in the triathlon space. I actually just had a previous guest who did the Ironman. She did the Ironman for the first time. And we were chatting a little bit. And I'm like, all right, you know what? Eventually I have so many of you guys on my show. Eventually I'll have to hold myself accountable. And now I got to get my ass in shape and let's get it done. So, with all that, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Is there anywhere you send people to, keep up with your journey, there's LinkedIn, socials? How do you get people to, if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah. It's check out the Institute of
Mhm.
Purpose.org. And it's a small web project that we put together for people to talk about what is their purpose in living. And I spend a lot of time speaking about purpose, and
Mhm.
I use this bike ride kind of as a kickoff for that.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's so that's the best place to find me. I'm on
I
I'm
got
on social, but I'm not very good at it.
not active. Yeah. I mean, well, I'll make sure I include all of it in the show notes as well. So
Yeah.
with all that, Jeff, the thing I do with all my guests is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are writing, you are submitting all these scripts. You're getting rejected. You're going through it. You're trying to find a job. All that. I want you to pretend that person, that version of Jeff, has come into the Zoom room, and you're the version of Jeff you are now. Just give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Say yes to everything. That's
Oh,
all I can say. Just say yes to everything, because someplace in those yes answers is something that's really going to hit. If you don't say yes, then the answer is a guaranteed no.
wow.
So when something comes in front of you, just say yes. And then if it doesn't work, who cares?
That is a new one here. That really is. I mean, there's a lot of people who've been on the show who have talked about saying no to too many requests. You just flipped it and said say yes to everything because you never know, and be optimistic. So I appreciate the perspective, man. Appreciate what you're doing. And again, looking forward to keeping up with your journey and staying in touch with you and seeing everything that's going on. And you will get that mile by the time this episode comes out. I'm decreeing and declaring he's actually going to get that record. All right.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Fellas.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Go. Did you have anything else you want to share?
No, we're good. Have fun, you know?
All right. All right. Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.